Israel's War of Independence was fought 70 years ago. The world has changed since then. Generations have come and gone. But the descendants of Arab refugees of that war are still, today, refugees. Why? 1948. Masses of refugees seek shelter all around the world. 60 million World War II refugees were scattered across Europe, but mostly resettled by 1951. The partition and war between India and Pakistan displaced 13 million people, who resettled in a massive population exchange. And in the Middle East, as the Arab-Israeli war raged, some 750,000 Palestinian Arabs fled the battleground. According to historian Benny Morris, the majority left to escape the war launched by Arab states, while smaller numbers were expelled or responded to calls by Arab leaders to make way for advancing Arab forces. Meanwhile, 850,000 Jews were forced out of Arab countries across the region. Most of them resettled in Israel, and 3 generations later, they account for 50% of Jewish Israelis. But the Arab Palestinians, who became refugees at the same time, were never resettled and remain refugees to this day. After the war, the UN established UNRWA, specifically to aid Palestinian refugees. The agency set up 62 refugee camps and created its own network of schools and health services that exist to this day. A year later, the UN Refugee Agency was established in order to resolve refugee problems by repatriation, resettlement, or integration. The UNHCR has resettled tens of millions and served every refugee group in the world, except for the Palestinians. Palestinian refugees remain the responsibility of UNRWA, whose mandate is not to resolve their refugee status, but to sustain them, providing direct relief and work programs. In 1982, as natural growth in UNRWA's now permanent camps took its course, the agency granted refugee status to all descendants of the original refugees.
Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the original refugees have become 5 million, making this conflict much more difficult to solve.
Today, UNRWA presides over an open-ended crisis which continues to grow exponentially. Over 5 million Palestinians are registered with UNRWA as refugees, including 1.6 million Jordanian citizens who are still considered refugees in violation of the UN's own rules. And over 2 million in the West Bank and Gaza already living under Palestinian control and within Palestinian towns.
Our right of return is sacred, and that doesn't mean a return to the 1967 territories in the West Bank and Gaza, but a return to our villages and towns, the entire land of Palestine.
The claim of a right of return is a demand to resettle UNRWA's 5.2 million registered Palestinian refugees in Israel.
Completely overnight, radically changed the demographic balance in the country.
Returning Palestinians would outnumber Israeli Jews.
There's no Israel.
The Palestinians are going to have to recognize that the right of return would extinguish Israel as a Jewish state, and that's not an option.
The United Nations Relief and Works Agency perpetuates the idea that Israel and Zionism can be rolled back decades.
I'm from Jaffa, which means I have to go back to Jaffa. If I don't go back, maybe my son will, maybe my grandchild. Why would I leave Balata refugee camp and go live somewhere else? I'd give up my right of return.
We have a Western community that on the one hand says that it supports peace, that it supports both Jews and Arabs understanding that they will not have all of it, and on the other hand, they are funding an agency that leads the Arab Palestinians to believe that yes, one day they will have all of it.